My sister broke my ribs. Mom whispered, "Stay quiet. She has a future." Like covering for her was some noble act, but my doctor didn't blink. She saw the bruises, looked me in the eye, and said, "You're safe now." Then she picked up the phone. Guys, this happened 3 years ago, but I'm finally ready to share the whole story. This is long, but stick with me, because the ending is absolutely worth it. I'm 30 now, and what I'm about to tell you completely changed my perspective on family, loyalty, and standing up for yourself when toxic people try to walk all over you. Growing up in Millfield, Ohio was like being trapped in a snow globe. 16,000 people. Everyone knows your business, and escape feels impossible. My dad, Robert, built his welding shop from nothing, starting in our garage with borrowed tools. Mom, Linda, was completely obsessed with what the neighbors thought. From day one, my sister Jessica was treated like royalty, while I was the family disappointment. She's 3 years younger and has been spoiled beyond belief since birth. Picture this: Jessica throwing screaming tantrums in grocery stores until my parents bought whatever she wanted just to avoid public embarrassment. Meanwhile, when I asked for a softball glove, it was always, "Money doesn't grow on trees, Stephanie." As kids, Jessica would deliberately destroy my stuff whenever she got mad. Video games, books, model kits I'd spent weeks building. Every single time, my parents replaced her damage and told me to be understanding because your sister has big emotions. Big emotions. She was a spoiled brat who'd never heard no in her life. The teenage years were worse. Jessica developed a cruel streak, constantly insulting my appearance, grades, friends, whatever would hurt most. She'd call me a loser, say I was embarrassing the family, predict I'd never amount to anything. When I complained about her verbal abuse, my parents dismissed it as sibling rivalry and told me to develop thicker skin. The favoritism was absolutely insane. I worked incredibly hard for mostly A's and B's in AP classes while holding a part-time job, earning a brief. That's what we expect. Jessica brought home C's and D's after zero effort, and suddenly it was celebration time because she's trying her best. When I got accepted to State University for mechanical engineering with a partial scholarship, my parents just nodded. When Jessica barely graduated and enrolled in community college for fashion merchandising, they threw a huge party and bought her a brand new Honda Civic. Every summer from 15, I worked at Dad's welding shop, backbreaking labor in 95 degrees heat for $12 an hour, learning the trade while saving for college. Jessica spent her summers lounging at the pool and shopping with Daddy's money. She didn't work a real job until she was 22. After grinding through 4 years of college with multiple part-time jobs, I landed a production supervisor position, making $76,000 annually. Excellent money for our area at 25. I moved home temporarily to pay off student loans faster, thinking maybe now they'd see me as successful. Wrong again. Jessica remained the golden child, now dating Chad from the luxury car dealership. He drove a BMW and took her to expensive restaurants, so Mom thought he was perfect. Dad liked his big talk about business opportunities. The whole dynamic was toxic beyond belief. Jessica had become an entitled, materialistic princess, living rent-free with my parents after community college, working part-time at some overpriced boutique. Meanwhile, I was working 50-plus hours weekly, paying them $800 monthly rent, which Jessica never contributed to. Yet somehow, I was still the family screw-up. When I achieved something at work, it was downplayed or ignored. When Jessica bought a $300 handbag with money she didn't earn, it became front-page news on Mom's Facebook, complete with posts about her successful daughter. Some families are just beautifully broken. The absolute breaking point that changed everything came when I got promoted to senior production supervisor with a substantial raise to $87,000 annually. I was genuinely excited to share this news at our regular Sunday family dinner, thinking that finally this would be something my family could actually be proud of me for achieving. I had worked incredibly hard for this promotion, putting in extra hours and taking on additional responsibilities for months to prove I deserved the advancement. I barely managed to get halfway through explaining the details when Jessica suddenly cut me off mid-sentence to announce that Chad had taken her to look at engagement rings that very weekend. Just like that, my significant career achievement was completely forgotten and dismissed. Everyone at the table was gushing over her potential engagement to this guy she'd been dating for only 8 months and barely knew anything about. "He showed me this absolutely gorgeous 2-carat solitaire," she squealed excitedly, immediately pulling out her phone to show off the pictures she'd taken. "It's exactly what I've always dreamed of having. He told me he's planning something really special for next month, and I just can't wait to see what he has in mind." Mom was practically vibrating with excitement. "Oh, honey, this is absolutely wonderful news. Have you given any thought to potential venues yet? I know the country club has a long waiting list, but I could call my friend Martha and see if she can pull some strings." Dad nodded approvingly, like Chad had already asked for his blessing. "Chad's a really smart young man with a good head for business. He'll be able to provide well for you and give you the lifestyle you deserve, princess." I sat there listening to this complete garbage, thinking about how I'd been working my absolute tail off for years, while Jessica coasted through life, expecting everything to be handed to her on a silver platter. And now she was about to marry some guy who probably made less money than me, but drove a flashy car and knew how to sweet-talk my parents. "That's really great news," I said, trying my best to keep the frustration and disappointment out of my voice. "Chad seems like a nice enough guy, and I'm happy for you. By the way, I actually got some exciting news this week, too. I was promoted to senior supervisor with a 12% raise." "Oh, that's nice, sweetheart," Mom said in this completely absent, distracted tone while she continued scrolling through ring photos on Jessica's phone. "Jessica, did you see this one with the halo setting around the center stone? It's absolutely stunning and would look perfect on your hand." And that was literally it. My significant promotion and raise got dismissed with a casual, "That's nice," while Jessica's maybe engagement dominated the entire next 2 hours of dinner conversation. It was the same old pattern playing out again. Stephanie's actual accomplishments don't matter, but Jessica's potential accomplishments, based on some guy's money, are earth-shattering news. 3 weeks after that dinner, Chad completely blindsided Jessica by breaking up with her out of nowhere. Apparently, he'd been seeing someone else behind her back the entire time, and Jessica only found out when the other girl posted pictures of them together on social media. All that ring shopping had been complete lies and manipulation. The guy was just stringing her along while he figured out which girl he actually wanted to be with long term. Jessica had what can only be described as a complete psychotic breakdown when she found out. We're talking about full-scale hysteria, screaming at the top of her lungs, crying uncontrollably for hours, throwing and breaking things around the house, and threatening to completely ruin his life and make him pay for what he did to her. Mom and Dad spent the entire weekend consoling her and enabling her victim complex, while she alternated between sobbing dramatically and plotting elaborate revenge schemes against Chad and his new girlfriend. I actually felt genuinely bad for her at first, because getting cheated on really does suck, and having your engagement dreams completely crushed is legitimately rough to deal with. But Jessica's reaction was so incredibly over the top and entitled that my sympathy disappeared pretty quickly. She was acting like the entire world owed her that engagement ring, like Chad had committed some unforgivable crime against humanity by choosing someone else over her, instead of just being a normal person who changed his mind about a relationship. The absolute worst part was watching my parents completely enable Jessica's victim complex and delusional thinking instead of helping her process the situation in a healthy way. Rather than telling her to move on with dignity and learn something valuable from the experience, they fed directly into her delusions that she was some tragic princess who had been horribly wronged by an evil villain. They even offered to pay for her to get away and heal properly with an expensive vacation to Mexico, because apparently getting dumped now qualified her for a free therapy trip. Meanwhile, I was still working my demanding job, still paying rent that Jessica never contributed to, and getting absolutely zero emotional support for the stress and pressure of my career responsibilities. But Jessica got a free vacation because her boyfriend of 8 months didn't propose. The double standard was absolutely unreal and infuriating. 2 weeks after the dramatic breakup, Mom decided we desperately needed a family healing dinner to help Jessica work through her incredibly difficult time. She spent multiple days planning this elaborate meal with every single one of Jessica's favorite foods, like we were mourning an actual death instead of the end of a relationship with some jerk she barely even knew. The dinner was scheduled for Saturday night, and Mom went completely overboard with all the preparations. She spent hours cooking Jessica's favorite lasagna from scratch, homemade garlic bread, Caesar salad with fresh croutons, and this incredibly fancy tiramisu that she special ordered from an Italian restaurant downtown. The dining room was decorated and set up like we were hosting visiting royalty, complete with the expensive china that only came out for major holidays and fresh candles everywhere. I showed up exactly on time, as always, really hoping we could just get through the meal without any major drama or emotional outbursts. Jessica had been completely unpredictable all week long, sometimes crying and playing the victim, sometimes angry and plotting revenge, sometimes acting like absolutely nothing had happened and everything was totally fine. I never knew which version of her I was going to encounter at any given moment. The conversation started out normally enough. Mom asked detailed questions about my current work projects and the challenges I was facing. Dad talked enthusiastically about a big fabrication contract he had just landed that would keep his crew busy for months. Jessica was unusually quiet, but seemed relatively stable, picking at her food and occasionally joining the conversation when directly addressed. About halfway through the main course, Mom brought up Jessica's healing process and how incredibly proud she was of how strong and mature Jessica was being about the whole breakup situation. I literally almost choked on my water when I heard that. Strong and mature? She had spent 2 solid weeks acting like her entire life was completely over because some guy she barely knew didn't propose after 8 months of dating. I honestly think this whole experience is going to make you an even stronger person in the long run, Mom said earnestly, reaching across the table to squeeze Jessica's hand in a show of support. You truly deserve so much better than Chad anyway. You're beautiful, intelligent, accomplished, and driven. Any man would be incredibly lucky to have you in his life. Accomplished? Jessica worked part-time at a boutique selling overpriced clothes and lived with our parents completely rent-free at age 24. But sure, let's call that accomplished and driven. Then Jessica started talking about her grand plans for moving forward and how she was going to level up her entire life and find someone who was truly worthy of everything she had to offer. I've actually been thinking seriously about maybe moving to Columbus, she announced dramatically, like this was some groundbreaking decision. Get away from this small town and all the painful memories. Maybe take some real classes, meet more sophisticated men who actually appreciate quality. That's an absolutely wonderful idea, sweetheart, Mom said immediately, practically glowing with enthusiasm. A fresh start in a bigger city is exactly what you need right now. Your father and I would be more than happy to help you get set up in a nice apartment and get established. Of course they would be. Jessica casually mentioned wanting to move to the city and immediately got offered full financial support without even asking. When I moved out for college, I got told, "You're an adult now, time to figure things out for yourself," and had to work multiple jobs just to survive. I really think I deserve to be with someone who can actually match my level of ambition and drive, Jessica continued, getting more animated. Someone successful and motivated, who can provide the kind of lifestyle I've always wanted and know I deserve to have. I couldn't help myself anymore. What ambition exactly? I asked, genuinely curious. You work 20 hours a week at a clothing store and live with Mom and Dad rent-free. Where exactly is all this ambition you keep talking about? The entire table went completely silent. Jessica's face immediately darkened with anger, and I could see Mom shooting me serious warning looks. But I was absolutely tired of sitting there pretending Jessica was some kind of successful, independent career woman when the reality was completely different. I have plenty of ambition and drive, Jessica snapped defensively. Just because I haven't found exactly the right opportunity yet doesn't mean I'm not motivated and goal-oriented. Right, I said, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. Working 20 hours a week folding clothes is definitely the same thing as having ambition and drive. Stephanie, Dad said sharply, using his stern parental voice. That's quite enough of that attitude. Is it really, though? I pushed back. We're sitting here having this whole conversation about how accomplished and ambitious Jessica supposedly is, but what exactly has she actually accomplished in her life? She barely managed to graduate high school, dropped out of community college after just 2 years, and has never held a full-time job with real responsibilities. Meanwhile, I'm working 50-plus hours a week with an engineering degree, and somehow I'm still treated like the family disappointment who can't get her act together. Jessica's face was turning red with rage. At least I don't live a completely pathetic, boring life like you do, working at some stupid factory with no boyfriend, no social life, no fun whatsoever. You're obviously just jealous because Chad chose me over someone like you, and you can't handle it. Chad didn't choose you, I shot back immediately. He dumped you for another girl after stringing you along for months, and you're sitting here acting like you're some incredible prize when you've literally never accomplished anything meaningful in your entire life except spending other people's hard-earned money. How dare you speak to your sister that way, Mom yelled, slamming her hand on the table. I will not tolerate that kind of disrespect in this house. How dare I tell the truth for once? I'm completely tired of sitting here pretending Jessica is some successful, independent woman when she's actually just a spoiled brat who has never faced any real challenges or responsibilities in her entire life. Jessica stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. You're just jealous because I'm everything you'll never be. Attractive, popular, desirable. No man is ever going to want a pathetic loser like you. And deep down, you know it. At least I don't have to rely completely on my looks to get by in life, I fired back without thinking. When those fade in a few years, what exactly are you going to have left? No education, no real skills, no work ethic whatsoever. You're going to be a 40-year-old woman still living with mommy and daddy because you never bothered learning how to actually take care of yourself. That comment hit a major nerve. Jessica's face went from red to purple, and I could literally see her hands shaking with pure rage. You worthless piece of trash, she hissed through clenched teeth. You're just mad because even Chad, who dumped me, is still more successful and accomplished than you'll ever be in your pathetic life. You'll never be anything but a small-town loser working in some factory until you die. I'm a supervisor making $87,000 a year with excellent benefits, I replied calmly. Chad sells cars and lives in a one-bedroom apartment, but sure, he's definitely more successful than me. Money isn't everything in life, Jessica shrieked, completely losing control. He has style, charm, and real ambition to become something bigger and better. You're just content being mediocre and average your whole miserable life. And you're apparently content being a gold-digging parasite who contributes absolutely nothing useful to society while expecting everyone else to support your lifestyle. That's when Jessica completely and utterly lost her mind. She grabbed her full water glass from the table and hurled it directly at my head with significant force. I managed to duck just in time, and it shattered against the wall behind me, sending water and glass fragments spraying everywhere. "Jessica!" Dad yelled at the top of his lungs. But she was nowhere near done with her tantrum. She came storming around the table toward me, screaming about how I was a worthless piece of trash who ruined everything good and destroyed the family. I immediately started backing toward the kitchen, not wanting to escalate the physical confrontation any further than it already had. "Stay away from me right now," I warned firmly. But she kept advancing aggressively. "You think you're so much better than everyone else," she screamed, shoving me hard in the chest with both hands. "You're absolutely nothing. Nothing." I stumbled backward but managed to catch myself before falling. "Jessica, you need to calm down immediately. You're acting completely crazy." "Don't you dare call me crazy." She shoved me again, even harder this time, putting her full body weight behind it. I put both hands up defensively. "Stop it right now. You seriously need to back off before this gets worse." But she was completely beyond reason at that point. Jessica had this look in her eyes that I had literally never seen before, pure, undiluted rage and hatred. She came at me one more time, and when she shoved me with everything she had, I was standing directly next to the granite kitchen island. The sharp edge caught me perfectly in the lower back, and I heard this sickening cracking sound as my body hit the corner with tremendous force. Intense pain immediately exploded through my entire torso, and I suddenly couldn't breathe at all. I collapsed to the kitchen floor, gasping desperately for air and feeling like someone had just stabbed me with a knife. Jessica stood over me, still screaming hysterically. "Get up right now. Stop being such a pathetic drama queen about everything." Mom and Dad came rushing into the kitchen when they heard me hit the floor. Mom screamed when she saw me curled up in agony, clearly unable to move properly. "What happened here?" Dad demanded, looking back and forth between Jessica and me. "She fell," Jessica said immediately, without hesitation. "She was backing away from me and tripped over her own clumsy feet. It's not my fault she can't walk properly." I tried desperately to speak, but couldn't get nearly enough air into my lungs. Every single breath sent sharp, stabbing pains through my chest, like nothing I had ever experienced before. "She pushed me," I finally managed to gasp out between attempts to breathe. "I barely even touched her," Jessica said, her voice immediately getting defensive. "She's totally overreacting to everything like she always does. You know how dramatic and attention-seeking she can be." Mom knelt down beside me and started checking me over, her old nursing training automatically kicking in. Her breathing is really shallow and labored, she said with obvious concern. And look at her color. Something is definitely wrong here. I think my ribs, I managed to whisper through the pain. Maybe we should take her to the emergency room, Mom suggested, clearly worried about my condition. Let's not overreact to the situation, Dad replied dismissively. It's probably just bruised from the fall. Take some ibuprofen and get some rest and see how you feel tomorrow morning. I literally could not believe what I was hearing. I was obviously seriously injured and could barely breathe, and Dad wanted me to take an aspirin and sleep it off like it was a minor headache. With their help, I somehow managed to get to the living room couch. Though every single movement sent waves of agony through my body, I ended up spending the entire night propped up in the recliner because lying down flat was completely impossible due to the pain. By morning, I knew without any doubt that I had to get proper medical attention, whether my family liked it or not. The pain had actually gotten significantly worse overnight instead of better, and I was having serious trouble breathing normally. When I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, the entire left side of my torso was purple and black with bruising. The harassment started early. The first call came at exactly 7:15 in the morning. Mom's distinctive ringtone. "Stephanie, honey, how are you feeling this morning?" Her voice was artificially cheerful and casual, like she was asking about a mild cold instead of potentially serious injuries. "Absolutely terrible," I croaked, my voice barely working. "I'm pretty sure I have broken ribs. I really need to go to the hospital right away." "Oh, sweetheart, I'm completely sure it's not nearly that serious," she said dismissively. "You know how these things always feel much worse the day after. Why don't you just take some ibuprofen and use a heating pad for a while?" "Mom, I can barely breathe without severe pain. Something is seriously wrong with my chest." "Listen carefully," she said, her tone shifting to something more serious. "About last night. Jessica feels absolutely terrible about what happened. She definitely didn't mean for you to get hurt like this." She threw a glass at my head and then deliberately pushed me into a granite counter. How exactly did she not mean for me to get hurt? "Before you do anything drastic that you might regret later, I really think you should consider what would be best for the entire family. Jessica is finally starting to heal from her terrible breakup. If this becomes some kind of big legal issue, it could completely destroy all the progress she's made." "Are you seriously asking me not to get medical treatment for my injuries?" "I'm asking you to think carefully about the long-term consequences of your actions. Your father's business reputation in this community, Jessica's future prospects and opportunities. These things really matter, Stephanie. And for what? Some bruised ribs that will heal perfectly fine on their own anyway?" I hung up on her immediately. I couldn't listen to another word of that manipulative garbage. Exactly 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. Dad, this time, calling with the exact same talking points about family reputation and not making things worse than they supposedly needed to be. When I told him firmly that I was going to the emergency room regardless of what they wanted, he said in this threatening tone, "Stephanie, I want you to think very carefully about what you're about to do here. Jessica has worked incredibly hard to build a good reputation in this community. A criminal record would completely destroy all her future prospects and opportunities. Maybe she should have thought about that before she assaulted me and broke my ribs." "It wasn't assault," he said sharply. "It was a family disagreement that unfortunately got out of hand. Don't blow this completely out of proportion." My phone immediately started buzzing constantly with text messages. "Mom, please reconsider your decision. Jessica is absolutely devastated about last night and what happened. Dad, think about what's truly best for the family, not just yourself and your feelings. Jessica, I'm sorry you got hurt, but it was obviously an accident. Don't be such a drama queen about this." Around 10 o'clock in the morning, a delivery person showed up at my door with this enormous gift basket. Expensive chocolates, gourmet coffee, fancy bath products, and high-end over-the-counter painkillers. The card attached read, "Feel better soon. Family always comes first. Love, Mom, Dad, and Jessica." The message couldn't have been clearer. "Here's some nice, expensive stuff to make you feel better. Now please shut up and don't embarrass us publicly." I called my buddy Jake from work to ask if he could drive me to the emergency room since I was in no condition to drive myself. When he arrived and saw me struggling just to get into his truck, his expression immediately got serious and concerned. "Who did this to you?" he asked directly, not beating around the bush. "My sister Jessica. She pushed me into a granite counter during an argument." "And let me guess, your family doesn't want you to report it officially, right?" "How did you know that?" Because that's exactly how these situations always play out. The family automatically protects the abuser and pressures the victim to stay quiet to avoid embarrassment. I've seen it happen before in my own extended family. The emergency room was extremely busy that morning, but the triage nurse took one look at my condition, pale, hunched over, struggling to breathe properly, and immediately flagged me as urgent. Within 30 minutes, I was in a private examination room. My doctor was probably in her early 40s, with this completely no-nonsense professional attitude that reminded me of my favorite college professor. She carefully reviewed my intake forms where I had written chest injury from fall and then looked at me with obvious concern. "Tell me exactly what happened to cause these injuries," she said, pulling up a chair to sit directly across from me. I had originally planned to stick with the accident story to avoid complications, but something about her direct professional manner made me hesitate. "I fell backward into a kitchen counter, hit my back on the sharp edge." "How exactly did you fall?" That's when it suddenly hit me like a lightning bolt. I was about to lie to a medical professional to protect someone who had deliberately and violently hurt me. Someone who hadn't even bothered to check if I was okay this morning and who had actually called me a drama queen for being injured. "Actually, that's not exactly what happened," I said, making a split-second decision. "My sister pushed me during an argument. We were fighting, and she deliberately shoved me backward into a granite countertop with significant force." "Was this intentional violence on her part?" "Yes, absolutely. She was extremely angry, and she deliberately pushed me as hard as she could." My doctor nodded seriously and made detailed notes in my chart. The physical examination was thorough and professional, but I could clearly see the growing concern in her eyes as she checked my breathing and carefully felt around my injured ribs. "We're definitely looking at multiple fractured ribs based on your symptoms," she said after completing her examination. "I'm going to order x-rays immediately to determine exactly how many and how severe the fractures are." The x-rays confirmed her professional suspicions: 3 completely broken ribs, with one showing concerning displacement that could potentially cause serious complications. When she returned to the examination room with the official results, her expression was extremely grave and serious. "Stephanie, these are very significant injuries that require immediate attention and careful monitoring," she said, sitting down across from me again. "You have 3 fractured ribs, and the displacement of one of them is quite concerning. Based on the nature and severity of these injuries and what you've told me about how they occurred, I am legally required to file an official report with the authorities." My stomach immediately dropped. "What kind of report?" "I am a mandatory reporter for cases of domestic violence. What you've described, intentional physical violence resulting in serious bodily injury, falls directly under that legal category." "But she's my sister, not my boyfriend or husband." Domestic violence laws include all family members, not just romantic partners. The law doesn't distinguish between spouses and siblings when it comes to assault charges. I thought about my family's completely over-the-top reaction to me just going to the doctor for medical treatment. If police actually got involved and criminal charges were filed, they would absolutely lose their minds. "What exactly would happen if you file this report?" She explained the entire legal process clearly and professionally. An official report would be filed with law enforcement. The police would want to interview me about the incident. I would have the option to cooperate with prosecution or not, and there would be permanent documentation of the assault regardless of my decision. "I completely understand this is an extremely difficult situation," she continued with genuine compassion, "but I want you to consider something important. If one of your coworkers came to you with these exact same injuries and told you this exact same story, what would you advise them to do?" I knew the answer immediately and without hesitation. I would absolutely urge them to report it, to prioritize their own safety and well-being, and to recognize the clear signs of an abusive family relationship. "Okay," I said finally, my voice much steadier than I expected. "Do whatever you need to do." The consequences started much sooner than I had anticipated. Jessica was arrested just 3 days after my visit to the emergency room, and somehow photographs of her being led out of her workplace in handcuffs ended up on social media for the entire town to see. Small towns really don't keep secrets very well. My parents tried absolutely everything they could think of to pressure me into dropping the criminal charges. They sent various relatives to guilt-trip me about destroying the family. They had family friends coincidentally run into me around town to tell me how much I was supposedly hurting everyone. They even convinced our pastor to call me with a lecture about Christian forgiveness and family healing. The trial itself was absolutely brutal for everyone involved. Jessica's expensive lawyer tried desperately to paint me as an angry, jealous sister who was deliberately exaggerating her injuries to get revenge against her more successful sibling. The single moment that completely sealed Jessica's fate was when her own lawyer asked her directly if she was sorry for what had happened to me. Instead of giving a simple, sincere apology, Jessica launched into this long, self-pitying rant about how I had provoked her and how she was actually the real victim in the situation because her life was being ruined. I watched the jury members' faces very carefully during her testimony. They clearly weren't buying any of her victim act or excuses. Jessica was ultimately convicted on all charges and sentenced to 18 months in county jail, suspended to 6 months with good behavior, 3 years of probation, mandatory anger management classes, and 200 hours of community service. Her conviction made the front page of the local newspaper, and her dreams of moving to Columbus to find a wealthy husband were completely destroyed. During this entire legal process, I was steadily building a completely new life for myself. I had moved in with Jake, gotten another promotion at work, and started dating Norbert, a kind and grounded man I met through a mutual friend. He worked as an architect, and his steady, respectful presence was the complete opposite of the chaos I had grown up with. Without the constant stress and drama of toxic family relationships, my job performance actually improved significantly. The most satisfying part of everything was watching my parents' reputation in the community slowly but surely crumble. Word gradually got around about how they had pressured their injured daughter not to report her sister's violent assault, and people started seeing them in a completely different light. Dad's welding business took a serious hit as potential clients began questioning his character and integrity. About 8 months after Jessica's conviction, I happened to run into my dad at a gas station downtown. He looked absolutely terrible, stressed, exhausted, and aged about 10 years since I'd last seen him. "Stephanie," he said quietly. "Robert," I replied. I had completely stopped calling him Dad. "Maybe we could sit down and talk sometime, try to work things out between us." "What exactly is there to work out? You made your choice when you decided to protect Jessica instead of supporting me." I accepted that decision and moved on with my life. "She's been having a really difficult time since the conviction. Lost her job. Can't find another one anywhere with a criminal record following her around." "Good. Maybe she'll finally learn something valuable from facing real consequences for her actions." About 2 years after Jessica's conviction, my entire world changed in the most incredible way possible. I had been working on developing this innovative automated assembly system for our manufacturing plant, something that could dramatically increase efficiency while reducing costs and improving safety. My supervisor called me into his office one day with news that completely changed my life trajectory. "Stephanie, that automated assembly system you designed and developed, corporate headquarters wants to implement it across all 12 of our facilities nationwide. They're offering you a $25,000 innovation bonus. Plus, they want you to head up the entire rollout as regional manufacturing coordinator." Within 6 months, I went from making $87,000 to $145,000 as regional coordinator. I bought my own house, a brand new truck, invested in mutual funds, and still had more money than I'd ever imagined. The local newspaper even ran a feature. "Local Supervisor's Innovation Revolutionizes Manufacturing Industry," highlighting how this Millfield woman had become one of the youngest six-figure earners in the county. I should have known my family would come crawling back. First came the indirect approach. Mutual acquaintances started casually mentioning how proud my parents supposedly were, how they'd always known I was special, how much they missed me. I ignored every attempt. But life has a funny way of delivering revenge you never knew you wanted. Dad's welding business had been struggling since Jessica's conviction damaged the family reputation. Losing community trust meant fewer contracts and layoffs of experienced crew. Then came devastating news. Mom was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer, requiring aggressive treatment. The medical costs were crushing, and their terrible health insurance barely covered anything since Dad's failing business couldn't afford decent coverage. They desperately needed money fast. I learned about Mom's diagnosis through Jake's girlfriend via the local gossip network. My first instinct was genuine sympathy. Cancer is horrible regardless of history. But then I remembered how they had treated me when I was seriously injured, and that sympathy faded quickly. Dad showed up at my house one evening looking completely broken, aged 20 years. "Stephanie," he said, clearly having been crying, "we really need to talk." "About what exactly?" "Your mother's very sick. We desperately need help with medical bills. The business is barely hanging on." I leaned against my doorframe, deliberately not inviting him inside. "That sucks for you." He winced at my indifferent tone. "Please, I'm begging you. Help with the bills. I'll do anything. Apologize publicly. Make Jessica apologize. Whatever you want." "Where's Jessica in all this? Why isn't she helping?" "She can't help financially. Her gas station job doesn't pay much. And with her criminal record, she can't find anything better." "So let me understand this. When I was injured and needed family support, you told me to get over it and threatened to disown me if I didn't protect Jessica. But now that you need money, suddenly you want to be family again?" "Please," he whispered desperately. "I'll give you anything. The business, the house. I don't want your failing business or mortgaged house. What I want is for you to experience exactly what I did, being completely alone with no family support during your worst crisis." 2 weeks later, Jessica somehow got past security at my workplace. She looked terrible. Gas station work and poverty hadn't been kind. "I know you hate me, and you have every right," she said, genuinely humble for the first time ever. "What I did was completely wrong, and I'm truly sorry." "Are you sorry you did it, or just sorry it had consequences?" "Both, honestly." She started ugly, desperate, crying. "Please, I'm begging you. I'll sign documents saying I'll never contact you again. Move to another state, whatever you want. Just help her. Help her the same way you helped me when I couldn't breathe." "Get out." The final approach came from Mom herself, frail from chemotherapy, showing up at my house. "Stephanie," she whispered, "I'm dying." I heard about the diagnosis. "I know we failed you completely. I know we chose Jessica when we should have chosen you. I know we destroyed our family with favoritism. You're absolutely right. Can you possibly forgive us? Help us." I looked at this woman who had raised me, who had also spent years making me feel second class in my own family. "No, Stephanie, please. You had your chance to be my family when I needed you most. You chose Jessica. Now live with that choice." 6 months later, Mom died from cancer complications. I didn't attend the funeral. Dad's business went bankrupt, paying medical bills, and he lost the house to foreclosure. Jessica moved in with him in a small apartment. I heard Jessica had a complete mental breakdown after Mom's death, finally understanding her actions had far-reaching consequences. But by then, I had built a life that was mine alone, free of their poison. Norbert and I had moved in together, and for the first time in my life, I felt genuine love and stability. The girl who was once the family disappointment, the one told to stay quiet, the one dismissed over and over again, had built something no one could ever take away. I had my own home, a career I was proud of, a partner who valued me, a future that wasn't chained to the dysfunction of my past. And for the first time, I realized something important. Sometimes family isn't the people who share your blood. Sometimes family is the people who stand beside you when everyone else turns away. And I finally understood. I didn't need my parents' approval, or Jessica's validation, or the twisted idea of loyalty they demanded. I only needed to stand up for myself. And I did.